Hello and a very good afternoon. A hearty welcome to ET Auto and to this very special post-budget session with industry experts across sectors. Over the next 2 hours or so, we will have a host of industry leaders, as I mentioned, representing various sectors to give their viewpoints to assess the union budget of 2022-23, which was announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman a little while ago. This was her fourth budget. So let me now initially get in my colleague Sumant Banerjee, who's a consulting editor with ET Auto, like me. And let me get Sumant, your views on what are the key takeaways you think that are there in this budget, especially when it comes to the automotive stroke mobility industry.
Hi, Sumo. Good afternoon and welcome to all our viewers and listeners to this special post-budget session that we have organized and collated for you. Over the next 2 hours, we will try to get all the nuances of this budget with a special focus on the automotive sector. To start off with, Sumo, to be a finance minister of a country which is as wide and diverse as India, it is not an enviable job. We know as individuals, when we manage our own finances in our own one household, so often we go wrong. And by the end of the week or by the end of the month, we are stretching ourselves and then we course correct. And as a finance minister, you just get one chance in a year, and that is at the start of the year. What complicates matter further in these time and age is the pandemic, which has really stretched everybody. It's been a taxing time for the entire world. And to that extent, I think this year's budget does all the right things. It talks about all the right things. The fiscal deficit is being put under check, some kind of check. At the same time, the government is spending more, which was needed and which is very much there. And then where are you spending it? So for automotive sector, for example, the only big talking point was on green and electric mobility. And as we will hear going forward from various spokespersons who are joining in about the big move to initiate battery swapping and for a fresh new policy on that. It was on expected lines, and we knew that something like this would probably happen. So it's good that it has happened, and it will probably usher in a lot of momentum, which already is there in the electric mobility space. It will gather even more momentum going forward. So a welcome budget. There could be a few misses, which I'm sure others will point out. And a few of them are already here with us, so we can just set the ball rolling.
Indeed, I'm sure you'll be quite happy, because especially that you have a strong focus on the electric mobility industry also. But what I also take away is some, like for example, the plan to enhance the country's highway network by no less than 25,000 kilometers over the next year would bode well for the mobility as well as the automotive industry. And you know what? The focus on technology, incentivizing technology, let's say the rollout of 5G, which is expected in the coming year, there's a correlation there. Kind of enhanced better road network and enhanced connectivity would also have a indirect benefit, rather a direct benefit to the adoption of, let's say, connected vehicle technologies and various other technology which depend a lot on the good, consistent telecom network. And also another thing which really kind of caught my attention in the budget was the focus on having more sustainable urban centers. And as the Honorable Finance Minister mentioned that by 2047, which will be, by then India will be 100 years old as an independent nation, no less than 50% of the population of this huge country is expected to stay in urban areas, urban cities, and all the more reason to have sustainability as the core of any development project. I mean, it should have happened maybe a few years ago, but as they say, better late than never. And good to see that kind of focus that sustainability is gaining more kind of attention from the government. And as we all know, India has kind of committed to go carbon neutral by 2070. So while it may seem to be a quite a significant period, significantly long period, but things take time to kind of get executed and the intended results to be seen. So on that note, Sumant, I think let's welcome the esteemed industry leaders, panelists for this session. So let me welcome Mr. Nikunj Sanghi. He is a past president of FADA and also the former chairman of ASDC. Nishant Arya, the executive director of the JBM Group. And we also would like to welcome Mr. Ashok Minda. As we all know, Mr. Ashok Minda is a promoter of the leading Tier 1 group, Spark Minda. So welcome, gentlemen, to ET Auto, and it's our pleasure and honor to have this conversation with you. Starting off, Mr. Sanghi, key takeaways, according to you.
So I think positives are a huge focus on infrastructure, both by the center and the state. The 1 lakh interest-free 50-year bonds to the state to promote infrastructure under the Gati Shakti scheme of the government, I think are going to be a huge benefit for the automotive industry. It will spur demand across sectors, specifically the commercial vehicle segment. The other takeaway, of course, is a huge focus on EV, and EV in terms of infrastructure, because the finance minister talked about the intense charging infrastructure that needs to be created, and battery swapping. I think so. These two have found special mention in the finance minister's speech, and that is again a very, very big takeaway. There was some mention of the scrappage policy. Would have loved to see a follow-up in the part 2 of her speech, but did not find a mention. But I'm sure with the introductory remarks, she did talk of scrapping policy, and that should be again a very big positive for the auto industry. In terms of what did not enthuse me too much was no money in the hands of common man to promote consumption. Yes, the infrastructure will put in some money, the rural infrastructure will put in some money, the MSP will put in some money, but some relief on personal taxation, specifically for the middle class, which is probably hit the most by the 2 years of pandemic, was something that we were really hoping for. To some relief on fuel prices. I think that's one thing I talked about. There was, in fact, a reverse mention. She did mention an introduction of an additional cess of 2 rupees per litre from October 22 for unblended fuel. And there is unblended fuel which is still being sold. So that's going to be a problem specifically for the beleaguered two-wheeler industry, which is already under a huge amount of stress. I think two-wheeler industry was really hoping for some kind of relief to trigger demand, and that's something which is missing. And finally, of course, extension of MSME benefits for another 1 year, a special allocation, I think is another positive in the budget. Overall, I would say the budget is positive, but some things are missing, which specifically for the automotive industry, and which we had hoped that we will get some benefits out of it. But overall, a good, positive budget, a growth-oriented budget is what I would say.
So, Mr. Sanghi, how many marks out of 10 would you give to Mrs. Sitharaman?
7 out of 10.
Okay. So, not really distinction, but she passed off pretty well, according to you then.
Reasonably well, yes.
Reasonably well. So, Mr. Arya, now let me come to you. Your first thoughts on how you see this budget, the key things that it hit the ball out of the park, and some other things that you think should have been addressed and was not?
No, I see that's a very positive and very growth-oriented budget, first of all. And the way they have addressed the point, starting because from generation to consumption, if we look at the green energy and zero emission technologies, how they have realized about 20,000 crores of additional PLI for the solar modules manufacturing. And when we see even the largest contribution and most spoken about, the PM Gati Shakti, which cuts across the 7 engines, which is roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transportation, waterways, and logistics. All of them touch upon the automotive and the transport sector. And that I think will be very meaningful with such support to different states for the execution of the same in the states with 1 lakh crores. I think that will be really meaningful and will take a very long impact, which will be positively taken by many companies for investment. On the other hand, if we see among the top 3 ministries in the government, the allocation of funds has been to road, transport and highways. So they are among the top 3 ministries to have that kind of allocation, close to 200,000 crores. So I think that is going to be phenomenal for the commercial vehicle sector and for many upcoming sectors which are allied to that. And not only that, when we see at multiple centers of excellence which will be opened up, I think those centers of excellence would bring in a very good level of expertise which needs to be built, and how we are actually bridging the skill gap, as well as seeing that knowledge pool is being created for the industry at large. And last but not the least, how the battery swapping and energy as a service is being taken up, where we talk about inclusive development, we talk about productivity enhancement, we talk about sunrise opportunities or energy transition or climate action. I think at the genesis of all of this is the automotive and the transportation sector, where a definite focus is there, which gives us that kind of fillip for the future. At the same time, there's a clear understanding that because many automotive players are also catering to other related areas, like in defense, they have enhanced the capital procurement from 58% to 68% from local companies. So I think many companies should benefit from that as well. So I think there are some very enabling areas, zero fossil fuel zones, which they develop, the new interoperability rules, which they'll bring about here, how they would promote electrification. And I think this is very good from that perspective, and clearly adding few new sectors to infrastructure as well at this time on energy storage side and other sides. I think that is very good. What we would have clearly seen, would have expected, and I think would be the expectation from the sector in times to come, would also be that how we could get something on the R&D expenditure, because in the green mobility and the EV area, there's so much of investment being made by Indian companies on the R&D, on technology development. So if that can be incentivized like it was being done in the past or any other formats, I think that would really motivate and inspire the industry to really move forward and take things at a much faster pace. On the other hand, if we see that today, definitely the PLI schemes have been instrumental in really seeing the high participation of about 115 companies in the automotive and auto component area. So I think a similar focus, if it could be there for specific technologies around power electronics and other things, we are seeing focus on semiconductor and other areas. I think that would be very good, because that would really make India quite self-reliant in the longer term. So I think actions are being taken, but I think if certain more things could be brought up faster, that would really see that in line with PLI or with the FAME 2 being extended, there can be a lot of interconnected benefits which companies could accrue, and they could really support this cause of electrification and the green mobility going across in this case. So I think there are some very interesting things which have come across, and definitely that shows a clear roadmap for the future.
The good part is that there is so much more action that happens after the budget anyway during the course of the year, that just because something has not been announced doesn't mean it will not happen over the course of the year. We have seen PLI schemes were not actually part of the budget. They happened much later. Similarly, the National Infrastructure Pipeline was also announced as part of the COVID package and not really as part of the budget. So there is scope for this to happen. The big announcement on the battery swapping bit, as a electric bus maker, does that have any positives for you? Will that impact you in any way?
So in buses, battery swapping is not as prominent as it is in two-wheeler and three-wheeler. But definitely what happens is that when battery swapping stations are set up, that does bring in a very high level of power infrastructure being made available at those points across the city. So along with that, any kind of charging infrastructure can also be set up. So it's a win-win for the sector, whether you go for swapping or for fast charging, which is more prevalent in case of buses and as a EV ecosystem. So I think that definitely that will be beneficial in the longer term. And it also supports the energy storage as a service, which is going to be very important also from the round the clock power requirement of the country, so that we're not losing out and we're producing power at different intervals and using them in peak hours, so that and grid balancing also happens with that. So I think it has multiple facets to it. The batteries being primarily driven by the electric vehicle sector, but on the energy storage side and the grid side also, it has multiple benefits.
Right. There, let me bring you in, Mr. Minda. First of all, welcome to ET Auto. And as we speak, I can see Vinkesh joining in. Vinkesh,
Hi.
welcome to the session.
Thank you.
We'll get some viewpoints from you or from the impact or that the budget could have on the retail side. But before that, let me bring in Mr. Minda. The Spark Minda Group really is one of the few homegrown tier ones, which is investing heavily on building proprietary technological development capabilities. Today, we heard the Honorable Finance Minister mentioning talking about clean mobility systems, green energy, electric vehicles, and sustainability. These with the backdrop of the government's focus on being more Atmanirbhar or being more self-reliant, would you have liked to see some incentivization of R&D being made in the country? As Nishant also pointed out, that there used to be an incentive earlier, but a few years ago, that was discontinued. So would you have liked to see that? Sorry, I think you are on mute.
Yeah. Thank you. Am I audible, Sumantra?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello. Yes, you are.
First of all, I would say the budget is very bold by choosing the growth by focusing more on capital formation, increasing the capex outlay by more than 35%, which is 7.5 lakh crore, is a really a welcome step, and building another 25,000 kilometer highway in financial year 23, which is almost more than 65 kilometers per day. This will really help us in the automotive sector. Particularly, this will impact the demand of heavy commercial vehicle as well as also the other industry, and the focus on more MSME rural sector is also to make growth more positive. The step towards circular and green economy, which will be a good initiative on the right direction, which will growth and to be more sustainable for the future. I think the budget has all the ingredients for making India more Atmanirbhar. From the EV side, what we were thinking, and we know all this, the major concern for the EV penetration was the cost of the vehicle as well as the infrastructure. And this battery swapping policy, which has been introduced, and the standard will be formulated, and also to promote battery as a service, which definitely is an important step and will be expected to result in a faster adoption of of the EV. And we know that standardization makes the vehicle more cost efficient, and which will reduce the EV cost. And the announcement which today to plan the development of social mobility zone to promote the EV, and this will also help to create the infrastructure. The cost and the infrastructure was the major concern to promote the EV penetration. As Nishant also mentioned, the PLI scheme, along with the announcement of today, which will help faster adoption of the EV. Regarding the R&D benefit, what you have asked, yes, this is a very much needed as a homegrown industries and Indian, and as a Atmanirbhar organization, we continuously has to spend on R&D to survive our organization. So continuously we have to spend. It would have been better if we get more benefit or more advantage from the government side, but nevertheless we have to continue to work on this segment. Sumant also asked that how much we are going to benefited by battery swapping, that we have acquired a company in telematics. When you have to move the battery, the telematic is a important product to fit in the battery. That from our industry perspective, from Spark Minda, we will definitely get the advantage from telematics side.
Okay. So, like you mentioned, it would have been good to get some kind of support or encouragement for homegrown or local R&D activities. But let's hope that, like the PLI scheme, there would be some kind of policy or some kind of announcement outside of the budget to which will kind of meet that need of the Indian automotive industry, especially a homegrown company like Spark Minda. So, Vinkesh, a quick question from the direct tax perspective. There was nothing much that would help the consumer. So, are you a little disappointed by that?
Yes. Overall, we were expecting some changes in the direct tax point, and but I'll not say disappointed, but yes, we were looking forward to it, and that's where our disappointment is. So no doubt they have to balance the what comes in and what goes out. So maybe it wasn't in their mind as of today, but it would have helped us a lot if some relief would have come from that side, because currently the situation is not that great on the ground.
So Vinkesh, there is this point about fuel prices, which Nikunj Sanghi also raised, and this remains the elephant in the room. And fuel prices is something that impacts all the sectors, all the segments of this industry. What is your reading from this budget? Do you think there is going to be some shocks going forward in the next financial year? Because as we know, crude is already nearing $100, and we have not seen an increase in retail prices, even though the prices are already reasonably high. But after the elections, as is the case, we expect there will be some correction. What is your reading? Could that be a warning signal for us?
See, very frankly, Sumant, the current situation at the ground for the two-wheeler and in the market where the fuel prices actually affects a lot, it's really in a bad shape. The demand is bad. And on the other hand, we should be thankful that because of the election season, at least the prices are stable. And let's hope that till the time election comes to the end, which means by February end, the crude prices eases a bit and goes down so that the effect doesn't go to the market. But it's just not the fuel prices. I feel the rural market, the two-wheeler market is badly affected all across. And fuel price does affect it. It's a problem. It's a problem, but I don't know how can the current budget would be a negative or a positive if I talk on the fuel prices. I don't know the kind of 2 rupees per liter what they suggested on will it be passed or not, because not the right time to do that. If they really want to differentiate between blended and non-blended, they should at least wait for the products which should be able to be driven in a blended, or there should be at least the option to a customer to buy a product which can run on a blended fuel and non-blended. Then the price difference does make sense for that, or the effect on his buying, making a decision of buying or not. But as of today, when even they have an order of 10%, there is no fuel which is more than 6 or 7%, or it could be an average. Thinking of 20% or putting a stick of 2 rupees, I feel this was not wanted for. If they wanted to promote, it would be better done by putting some restrictions on the OEMs, which they're already doing through different ways. Not the right thing to increase the price to get something implemented. It will really affect the market in a negative way.
We are joined by two more guests, Mr. Sandeep Singh of Tata Hitachi and Mr. Kesavan from TAFE. So before we go to them, all our guests were already there. We are asking this question to everybody. How many marks are you giving to Mrs. Sitharaman for this budget? Nikunj Sanghi has already pronounced his verdict. Mr. Arya,
I would say 9 on 10.
Okay. So seems like you are a fan of Mrs. Sitharaman, so that's good to know.
No. I am always very factual, so what is always is good. So I can't deny that undoubtedly.
Okay, good. Vikesh, how many from your side?
6 or 7, I feel, not more than that, because like I said, no change in individual taxes, income tax. That is what we were all looking for and we were expecting. Even the direct taxes, so practically no benefit given to an Aam Aadmi. So I feel that was needed as of today, but 6 out of 10.
Tough to really impress you, it seems. But thank you so much, Vikesh, Mr. Arya, and Mr. Sanghi.
All right. Let me also welcome Mr. Singh and Mr. Kesavan, and we can see Mr. Jagdeep Singh Rangar also joining in. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for sparing your time to be on this very special post-budget session. Mr. Kesavan, your take on the budget's possible impact on the farming community or the sector that you represent, which is the farm equipment sector.
Yeah, I think considering that I represent also FICCI as a chair for the national agriculture, I think I'm going to take it a little more than that. I'm going to take it into the total of the agricultural area. So let me give you the answer you're going to ask me in the end. I'm giving around 8 out of 10 for the budget, only looking at the agri point of view. I think that's, for me, that's what is limiting me. The reason is very simple. I think certain messages has gone very strongly. Continuation of MSP, budget allotment for MSP, and focus on millets. And wherever there is an agri value chain and trying to bring in IT and into the agri value chain, and also adding PPP mode on it, very clear focus on drones and digitalization and land record. Very, very important for the low end of transaction, which we had a problem. The other interesting thing, I don't know how many of you noticed this. See, today, one of the problems we face is that the very small farmers, even for mechanization, as simple as mechanization once in a year or twice in a year, despite of renting, he is not able to get the renters because he is not able to pay. So one of the problems we have been noticing, and that almost is close to around 40-50% of the small farmers are stuck. So now they have put in, we have been requesting, they have put in a very clear statement that NABARD will support the rental for farmers through startups. So that's an interesting thought. We don't know the details, but I'm waiting to know the details. The other thing I think is very clearly signaling is wherever things are gone waste, they're trying to convert it so that the farmers really get the money. One typical is stubble burning, converting that into pellets and burning. It's now been officialized. I know it's been going for circles. Now it's very clear. So whatever has gone waste. Now, second thing is 8.1% of the petrol has been with biofuel, 10% of biofuel.
Yeah.
They are really pushing it to make it more than that. So there are 2 points to it. One is we also work it as an import substitution. You actually put money back onto the farmers because finally, after a long time, sugar mills have some money to give it. So I think these are all definitely positive steps. Question of river linking, some are long term, but one more focus, I love it, is they request for railways to create special packages for farmers and MSMEs, especially small and marginal farmers. See, the question is, these are all policy matters. I don't know the details. So end of the day, I need to get into the detail. But telling that this is what is going to happen and also putting the postal system into a banking system, this is, I think, is definitely going to help a lot of the rural people. So right. I'm not able to measure it today because I need to read the dotted lines and small prints. But I think overall, if you look at agriculture, I don't think it's a loser and it is going to prosper. One area people ask me this question is how was the MSME support? I think the MSME support for input and output of agriculture, I think is now getting focused. And I think that statement has come in. So it's not bad. So this thing, before you ask me once again, is 8 out of 10.
And I think that 2.7 lakh crore rupees earmarked for MSP would also influence your kind of result, right, on your score.
See, the real simple because, all said and done, we had a 3.9% growth compared to last year's 3.6. So agriculture has been doing well. And the question is, people have been asking, will I get MSP? So somebody need to answer them, yes, you will get MSP. So that also puts the agricultural, the agriculture people who are in the farming of agriculture who are looking for MSP at peace. So I think this is going to help overall.
Okay. Suman?
And I don't know whether after a long time, they took agriculture right up onto the top. Within about first 10 minutes, she started talking about agriculture. I was surprised and I expected a little more to come in, but fine. Everything cannot be covered in any budget.
Yes, Mr. Sandeep Singh, welcome to the show. And
thank you.
After a long time, I am getting to interact with you. So
yes, Suman, nice to see you.
Good opportunity for me as well. First up, your thoughts on the budget, the key takeaways for you, what all it did right, and where do you think there was opportunity for her to do something more?
Yeah, so first of all, I think I will give 7 out of 10. I will talk about it. What are my views? But continuity and consistency from the last year budget is one positive. There is no negative. There's no adverse news what we can see from this budget. The second thing is we are talking about fiscal deficit of 6.9% and GDP growth of say 9.2% or 8 to 8.5%, which is 9.2% this year, 8 to 8.5% next year is a positive sign. Now, what we need to do for that, so higher capital expenditure, more consumption-led activities by the government are going to play a very, very important role. So they have increased the capex. I think they are talking about improving the capex to 7.5 lakh crore, which is very good and which is quite high. So I believe if it is executed well, I represent construction equipment industry, which is directly related to infrastructure. So in infrastructure, they are talking about, which is the main demand driver, road construction. They are talking about 25,000 kilometers of road construction. which is generally, we look at construction of 10,000 to 12,000 kilometer road per year. I don't expect that even if you put all your act together, you can go beyond 15,000 kilometer, which itself is going to be good. For that, you need capex. That is what they have already allocated. So my take on this is that if this budget is executed well on the ground, can make huge difference. So therefore, whether it is road construction, where they're talking about express highways, they are talking about Jal Jeevan Yojana, where they want water at every, one tap at every home. And if they can implement it, which is a very big, project by the government, where they can provide water in rural and semi-urban area. And then overall execution of project, whether it is rail, port, airports, if they are done properly, we can look at growth of 8 to 0.5% next year. So I am not so much negative about the budget. My concern is only the execution on the ground. That is what I would like to comment.
Mr. Singh, you have mentioned it absolutely, the very critical point of execution of the plans or policies which get announced. And I was pretty sure that 25,000 additional road network would be good news for someone like you. But you are an industry veteran. Going by the previous instances, how much of a success rate have you observed in terms of the execution part of these very kind of commendable kind of announcements?
If we can execute 75% of this, will be excellent. Last year, the plan was go up to 45-50 kilometer a day, which was quite practical. Whether it is because of COVID or government, some of their policies, we are at 21-22 kilometer a day, which had come down from the previous year of 35 kilometer a day. So we are looking at road construction of about 40 to 45 kilometer a day, which can take it up to 12,000 or 13,000 kilometers itself. And I would say if we can reach up to anywhere 13 to 15,000 kilometers, it will be very good for the country, because road construction is not only for construction equipment industry, it is movement of goods, logistics. It is very good for irrigation. It is very good for overall economy of the country. So I think that would be one of the most important point where I would like government to focus upon. And as a corporate, we also need to support them. But that would be my answer to your question. Anywhere around 14 to 15,000 kilometers would be very good for the country.
At this point, let's welcome Mr. Jagdeep Singh Rangar also into the discussion. He's the chairman of the MSME Council at Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. So specific to your sector that you represent here, MSMEs, there's some mention of MSMEs. So how do you see that translating into? Because MSME is usually across sectors, the MSME sector is considered as the backbone of the industry.
Correct, Sumatra. Thank you for having me here. Yes, the MSME sector is, touted as the backbone of the economy. And there are some announcements in the budget today. Of course, the finance minister alluded to the ECLGS scheme for the hospitality sector, which I'm sure extending till March of 23, which I'm sure is going to be very welcome for that sector. For the other sectors, there was an enhancement given of 5% earlier, which we were expecting and hoping that would be enhanced to 10%. But unfortunately, that didn't come through. But nonetheless, the announcement on the CGTMSE scheme, the revamp of it, that is a welcome announcement. What exactly are the details that will need to be seen? Similarly, the announcement of the RAMP scheme, which is planned to be rolled out to make MSMEs more competitive and resilient. The details are, the devil is always in the details. So we need to know what exactly is going to happen in these areas. The other thing which was welcome was, the announcement that payment of running bills to the extent of 75% will be made in 10 days, and a robust mechanism will be put in place for dispute resolution. A lot of small companies and small suppliers suffer heavily because of this, because they don't have the means to take on the mechanisms that exist currently. So payment of 75% of the running bill within 10 days, if it is mandated and put in place, this will be definitely a good help and a good financial do away with a lot of the cash flow problems a lot of the small suppliers and companies face. There were a few things which we were hoping would be talked about today. The fund of funds, which was announced back in 2020, was again mentioned, but there are no concrete details still. Finance Minister did say that the government will chip in with 20% of the equity and 80% will be with the fund managers. But what exactly are the details of this? Because this was something which the MSMEs were eagerly looking forward to after it was announced back in the day. But even today, this is not something which is quite clear as to how the mechanism will work out. Doing away with the concessional duties and the EPCG scheme for import of capital equipment is another thing which is not very conducive. Of course, Atmanirbharta is the requirement of the day, but there are areas where we do need to upgrade our facilities, our equipment, etc. By importing. Per force, we have to import these equipments because they're not available here, and they help us in our export efforts. So this was another thing which perhaps we were hoping would be considered. Similarly, the PLI scheme, the MSMEs are not really directly involved in that scheme because the threshold is actually out of the MSME scope. So that is something which the government would need to, we hope, consider once again. Of course, the budget has a lot of continuity from the previous years in terms of the infrastructure spend, which will do well for industry, for the automotive, especially because of all the development activities that are going to take place. It's going to give a boost to component manufacturers as well as the OEMs. On the agricultural side, and the initiative, the announcement on the railways and the water scheme, again will give boost to demand, which is good for industry. But overall, I would say the budget was okay. I wouldn't rate it exceptional, but one would have expected certain more emphasis on this. And lastly, somehow we seem to leave out the M and the MSME. The SMEs tend to get certain benefits, but the moment you scale up and become a medium enterprise, you suddenly sort of lose out. It's almost like it's a disincentive to grow. So this is what my take was on the budget today.
And all put together, the score that you would give out of 10? I
would probably rate it around 6 out of 10.
Okay. There's another panelist score giving it the same score.
The same as Vinkesh. So there is this one question that has landed up on my WhatsApp inbox, and it is quite interesting. So this person asks that there are some specific segments of the auto sector which are not doing well. Tractors is one which seems to be some sluggishness. Now, obviously, it's a cyclical industry. Two-wheelers is the other one, and commercial vehicles is the third one, which had begun to, in a way, rebound a little bit before the Omicron outbreak seems to have again put a speed breaker. Passenger vehicles seems to be doing fine, according to him. I also probably agree. Now, does the budget do enough to spur a kind of turnaround in each of these segments? And I think that it is specifically asking the question whether the rural economy will get the needed boost so that these segments can do well henceforth. I would like to know from all of you, because all of you are in some way or the other attached with this particular question, Mr. Keswan, Mr. Singh, and of course, Vinkesh and Nikunj-san. What is your thought? Is the budget doing enough to spur a turnaround in each of these segments?
Can I start, take the answer?
Yes, please.
Simple. See, as far as I always link it, if you look at the tractor growth, and if you look at a long-term trend, it always linked to the agricultural growth. I know that percentages and tractor percentages came in with a little lag. Now, one thing we forget is during the first COVID year, the tractor boomed up to 9 lakhs. And that is a huge growth. And one of the reasons why it grew was, there was a lot of money available in the agricultural farmers, and they didn't have any way of spending it, in the sense that marriages were not there, the normal purchase was not there. So a lot of money at that time really got diverted into tractors. So we were expecting a little lull in this year, but not to the extent what has happened. But I get a feeling from next year onwards, we are seeing that the tractor will start slowly and steadily developing the way, because even today, many areas, as I rightly said, there is not enough agricultural power, mechanization power available. There is one more thing I want you to look at it is, see, when it comes to agricultural mechanization, my request is don't only look at anymore it as tractors, because I think it is going to be a tractors, a combination of the equipment which the tractor is going to draw, or also the equipment by itself, which is self-propelled. So it's going to be likely a different mixture. So, but if you ask me, yeah, next year we are projecting at least around a 4 to 5% growth compared to this year. And then I think we'll have a steady growth of anything up to 7% is anticipated next over 5-6 years. This is something we have been discussing. We have been having some chats with people like Crisil to understand. See, as far as you have a reasonably good monsoon and things continue, I don't think it'll be a serious problem as far as agricultural purchase of tractors, equipment, and implements. I mean, this is what I understand. I think I need to understand how the two-wheeler people and others look at it. Do they look at it differently than what we look at it? Thank you.
Nikunj sir, do you look at it differently?
Well, I would agree with Mr. Kesavan when it comes to tractors, but I'm a little more optimistic than Mr. Kesavan himself about tractors. I think tractors will do better than the 4 and 5% growth, because the harvest, we're looking at the harvest season. I think it's very positive, very good. The agriculture commodity prices are holding, and with some amount of money coming in rural infrastructure in terms of rural highways, also in terms of specifically it's central India, the linking project of the Ken and the Betwa rivers. I think that's a very big positive. And the money which is being given in the hands of the state government by way of interest-free bonds, I think is going to be focused more on rural areas. So I see tractors doing well. Two-wheelers, I am disappointed and very disappointed, because two-wheelers, I don't think should be looked at as a luxury or as an aspirational product. It's a need-based product. It's essential for mobility. In fact, I call it a fundamental right of each citizen to be able to move to his places of education, to places of his job, to do his small businesses. And with public transport not being available specifically tier 2, tier 3 and rural areas, I think two-wheelers was a sector which definitely required some kind of an impetus. But with no funds coming into the middle class population, which is the one which buys the two-wheelers, nothing for them at all, I think is a big disappointment for two-wheelers. Finally, commercial vehicles, I think again a big positive because of a huge focus on infrastructure. And that's going to have a huge rub-off on both construction equipment and commercial vehicles. So very big positive. I think two-wheelers is the one which is going to be impacted the most, or has been left out of the budget totally.
I mean, in a way, two-wheelers also get left out from the narrative. We always keep focusing on passenger vehicles and to some extent commercial vehicles a little too much, and leave two-wheelers aside, even though in terms of absolute volumes, they bring in a lot. And it really also shows any kind of economic movement. So if the economy is doing well and everybody is making money, two-wheelers tend to do very well. if the economy, the first signs of any distress are apparently always visible from a consumer side on two-wheelers and from a macroeconomy side on commercial vehicles. So I think two-wheeler is a major worry. Your thoughts, Sandeep San and Vinkesh, if you have anything to add.
Just one point, Sumant. I think
Yes.
Chetan would be the happiest person in our discussion today post the budget, and he would be providing, and players like him in the industry will be providing on the two-wheeler front, because definitely this would actually also end up promoting electric two-wheelers quite a bit, where battery swapping and solutions like those would be imperative in really seeing the transition of electric mobility in a much more expedited manner than what we would have envisaged. So I always personally feel that there are always two sides of the coin, which one has to understand in this case. And this is the pros and definitely the cons we've heard earlier on. Yeah.
Yes. I was almost hoping to see a champagne bottle next to Chetan, because this is something he has been fighting for the longest time. And finally, the God has smiled on him. So congratulations to that extent. I think you are the most happiest with the panel right now.
You know, Sumant, there are today 50 companies in India doing battery swapping, right? And it can enable electrification to grow by another 30% from already India's great target, right? Also, we've always seen that countries that have taken leadership on a new technology can not only be, leaders in their own countries, but globally. I think this is very important for us. What the government has done here is not just about what we do in India, but if we create the right ecosystem, that ecosystem could be the global ecosystem that can be used. And no country has done this before. And as we today are leaders in the two-wheeler space at a global level, and small cars and three-wheelers, there's a large opportunity for us in this new shift to become this. So I think this is a much bigger piece for us if we think of what we could do in the next 5 years with an area like this. It also, as India is putting its policies around lithium manufacturing, what battery swapping does is it ends up utilizing batteries 2-3 times more, and you end up using longer life batteries, which means our imports will be maybe 3 to 4 times less on lithium, right? So it's really a more holistic way as we think of what this could do for the economy on this area, right? And I really look forward to, of course, the nuances. You know, I think the challenges that the industry today has seen on this front is that the subsidies can't come to the end user. So hopefully this policy irons that out, right? Also, there's been this, inverted GST structure where a guy gets, auto driver who's going to get swapping services have to pay 18% GST, while vehicles are 5%. So what we're hoping is that this policy really irons out some of those nuances that are today challenging the industry. And even the world's largest manufacturer of batteries has announced it going into swapping, which means it's becoming mainstream. So how can we build that new business in India? And that policy is really forward-thinking, and big kudos. Along with the other parts, I think the idea of multimodal transportation, the idea about logistics platforms being created, the idea about how do we think of first mile, last mile across cities going electric, and with two-wheelers, this is also a big part because swapping would play a very large role in the two-wheeler industry, as Nishant pointed out too. So exciting times for the industry, not just, and of course it's going to help us, but I think it's much bigger than just a company. It's something that India needed to lead in, and I'm really glad that it's taken that initiative to be that leader. It's just how we're thinking after COP26, the kind of leadership we're showing. Look forward to this continuous leadership to make a greener world for ourselves.
I think, Mr. Singh, your views on the turnaround of various sectors of the industry, and how do you see it? And followed by me, after that, Vinkesh.
Yeah. So my take would be, I'm quite positive on tractor sale. I believe good monsoon sale, availability of finance, which has never been a problem for tractors, should lead to a good tractor sale. I would take it anywhere between 5 to 10% growth, which is with that kind of volume what they have attained last year. Not this year, not this financial year, last financial year would be a good, I think, growth we can see in tractors. In commercial vehicles, I think the upswing has just started. We see some positive signs in commercial vehicle, though we don't see it in construction equipment. I believe if we are looking at good capex investment, and we don't see yet private companies investing so much in their expansion. If we see that happening, I believe the commercial vehicle sales should also grow. It may not be very high, but then it should show us a positive sign. This year has not been a good year for commercial vehicles. In terms of two-wheeler, I'm quite bullish. I believe there has been some kind of confusion in the market, whether I should go for electric or I should go for a normal available scooter. That has also led to a little bit of a slowdown. As Chetan mentioned, battery swapping is in thing, the availability of infrastructure. And I believe EV will bring in a lot of energy in two-wheeler sales in the times to come. I am quite positive on two-wheeler sales growing in the coming year. So I'm quite positive in terms of automobile industry doing well. We may not see two-digit growth, but anywhere 8 to 10%, below 10% growth, I would look at in tractors, two-wheelers, and commercial vehicles, which will be very good. Now, again, I'm saying that the government, what capex they are talking about, they have to actually spend that. And that will bring in a lot of energy in the market. So, and that is what is going to generate employment. That is what is going to bring in happiness in the mind of people so that they can spend money. That is something which is very, very important especially for two-wheeler sales. So these are my comments on this. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Singh, for your comments. At this stage, I would like to welcome Mr. Satyakam Arya to this post-budget session on ET Auto. Welcome, Mr. Arya. Thank you for sparing your time to be part of this session.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And we were just coming to Vinkesh at the marketplace. How do you see things changing? What is your outlook?
So Sumant, I'll both Sumantra and Sumant. So I'll be a bit. See, very frankly, what I feel when you go through the budget, you feel that they have now shifted talking about automobile to mobility, and not even bothered about discussing or even thinking of. As of today, still we are doing 98% of ICE products. For them, it is not there. So as a budget, I feel that it should have been divided into two ways. One, future-oriented, what they really did with electric vehicles, swapping, and a lot of 3-4 major things which promotes electric vehicle, cleaner energy. That's a good thing. But on the other side, they should have seen what short-term issues are grappling with the auto industry. So practically, budget comes every year, no doubt. So every year means they have to see what's going wrong, which they should correct in the coming year, not plan for 20 years, 15 years, or 5 years from today. So that 5 years, 15 years, they've done good. Like everybody said, Mr. Mani would be the happiest. I agree. I feel everybody in automobile should be happy. The way the future is being created and shown the path that cleaner energy is the way. And the major problem is that whatever you do, even if tractor does good, car is doing wonders. But auto industry, when you take it, you are talking majority of two-wheeler, which is 70% of the industry. And if that 70% of the industry is degrowing by 20% for the past 2.5 years, whatever you grow, the industry is going down. You can slice the cake and say that the base was right, or the cream was right, or the cherry was right. But overall, we are in deep shit practically. So this is not a short-term issue. It's already been 2.5 years. Thanks to Sandeep ji, is positive about two-wheeler and all. That's good. He's an experienced person. Maybe it benefits. We'll be the happiest. So there are some positive things. So as of today, we are being affected mostly because of rural. So two things, like 25,000 kilometers of new highways. New highways means it normally goes from rural, not from urban. New highways, purchasing of the land means the money will go to farmers. Obviously, they'll get that purchasing power from that. And second part, when they talk of the MSP to farmers, 2.3 lakh crore, that also goes to the rural economy. So if across, maybe not directly benefit to auto, but if indirect benefit to things like this, which improves the rural economy, the purchasing power, the two-wheeler economy, the sales will go up. So I feel maybe not direct, indirect we benefit. So whatever we in turn are expecting, more power to the Aam Aadmi, to the normal human being who is already in distress because of the 2 or 3 phases of COVID, and they have been going through financial instability. So as a middleman, as a normal man, there is nothing direct, but if all these indirect things benefited and in turn benefit the auto industry, will be the happiest.
No direct benefit there, as you mentioned, especially in the hands of the rural population. Let me now bring in Mr. Arya here. Mr. Arya, 2 key factors, 2 key announcements made, which is part of the budget speech, was the focus on infrastructure development. As Venkesh was also mentioning, 25,000 additional kilometers to be built, planned to be built next year. And then also the focus to a shift of to promote a shift in the use of public transport, especially in urban areas. That should bode well for the commercial vehicle sector, doesn't it?
Definitely, yes, Sumantra. I think we've seen the government in the last years continuing to invest on infrastructure, and the continued thrust definitely helps. So whether it is 25,000 kilometers of highways or 48,000 crore for the PM Awas Yojana, whether it's Parvatmala now, I think all these initiatives will definitely help the automotive industry in general, and particularly the commercial vehicle industry. I think we've seen the uptick in the construction truck segment in the last 1.5 years. And we are definitely now very bullish that this momentum will continue. I think this is one hit, I would say, which the budget has. My fellow panelists also pointed out that we have to see whether the actual spending continues on the ground. I think there are still some procedural things which have to be set right, but the finance minister mentioned this in her speech, and we hope that this will be taken care of.
And we hope too that there is no slip between the cup and the lip. Sumant?
Yes, so we are also now joined by many new panelists. Mr. Nirmal Kumar Minda is with us. Mr. Inkajanam Gandhe of Dana India is also joined us. And of course, Mr. Prasant Doreswamy is also with us. I'll come to you, gentlemen, but I have one question for Chetan, because what we have seen in the budget is that the government will come up with a new policy for battery swapping. Well, the main issue of batteries relates to GST, which is really not covered cannot be covered under budget, but it probably gives you an indication that there will be a movement on GST as well, which is why you're talking about a battery swapping policy. Can you spell it out for our listeners, this nuance about what actually has happened in the budget and what the industry actually needs, which is not really in the purview of the budget, but actually is in the purview of GST?
Yeah, I'm hoping that the policy as a framework structure that enables all of the parts, right? The first key part is that today, if a customer buys a vehicle with swappable batteries, they're not getting the subsidy clearly. There's no clear process. So they can get it for a vehicle with fixed battery. The same vehicle, if it has swappable battery, there's no mechanism. So hopefully this creates a mechanism so the customer buying an auto rickshaw can also get that benefit, which today is not in place on this area, right? The second part is that as an operator, if you were to buy the batteries to set up a service, you would pay 18% GST on the batteries, right? But if you notice that when it clubs into a vehicle, today electric vehicles are at 5% GST. So therefore, as a service, the cost would go up significantly on this area. The third thing is both for charging and for battery services, there's a GST today of 18%. So actually, if you went and charged your electric vehicle or you swapped the batteries, you would pay on your price an 18% tax. Now, here we're talking of auto drivers and gig workers and stuff moving on to electrics. And so that, again, if that comes to like 5% like vehicles are, or like public transportation today is at 5%, that would be. So these are the two nuances that are very important in the GST, right? Because they actually give the end benefit to the customer in terms of a subsidy that can be claimed by them, which is already available by the government, and to a 13% reduction on his cost per kilometer. And that would really help accelerate this. So I'm hoping that under the broader framework, that these things are also are taken care of.
So the budget itself doesn't do anything concrete as of now, but it gives you a hope that for the next GST panel discussion, the GST meeting, whenever it happens, something will come up in the agenda which talks about battery swapping.
That's correct.
No, but just to add one point here, Chetan, just to understand, because other than buses and other places where you are charging to the government where you are not paid GST, otherwise all mobility service providers would charge GST from their customers, and you would get input rate of the battery service which you'd get, right? Because both would be on 18%.
If they're at 18, yeah. But today, for example, if you were looking at any service, it's at 5%, right? So the taxation there would be 5%. It's like an inverted duty structure, right? And as a battery, you buy it and you amortize it over 5 to 7 years. So there's a huge cash flow challenge if you pick it up on this area, right?
Okay.
Because you're trying to amortize this over a period of time. So there's an input issue around the battery, but more importantly, the output also, right? The end customer, the GST they pay. If you were a company using fleet services, you could probably get the GST benefit. But what about if you're an auto rickshaw driver? You can't get that benefit. You have to pay 18% GST and you can't claim it back. So I think the key is about the person who's today using it the most, which is the auto rickshaw driver, where we want to get that benefit captured, right?
Okay.
All right. Let me bring in Prashant here. Prashant, warm welcome to ET Auto, and thanks for participating in this session. Your initial your take on the budget and also, the Honorable Finance Minister also mentioned about that encouraging the private sector to develop more sustainable and innovative business models, especially, let's say, as Sumant was mentioning on the battery side, on battery swapping and battery or energy as a service. These are would these also kind of encourage you to look at new business avenues?
Certainly. Thank you, Sumanta. I think if you look at this 2022 budget, it's more sustainable development and a climate action, I think, seem to be the strong focus, right? As evident from the focus on 4 pillars of development, which our finance minister spoke about. That includes inclusive development, productivity enhancement, energy transmission, and also the climate action. Yeah, I think focus more on the job creation and opportunities for youth, and also a lot of digital push, are the topics that will, I think, pull the economy forward. Yeah, and we could see that. If talking about specific to automotive industry, although I have to say that detailed notifications are not yet released, I think there are some highlights from my perspective. Number one, I think there haven't been any big direct announcements, certainly for the automotive. I think the announcement of a battery swapping policy is very welcome. I think if implemented efficiently, I think this could have a huge positive impact on EV manufacturers. It will also be sort of a positive news for startups in this space as well, right? This policy could boost the move of electrification of public transport and drive movement to electrification for fleets for the last mile connectivity, example, e-commerce, delivery, three-wheeler transportation, etc. Yeah. I think general expectations from the sector, like the incentives for new electric vehicle adoption or the tax cuts, reverse duty structures, unfortunately have not been addressed. I think as an industry, we were very hopeful that the government will introduce a reduction in the GST levy, but did not see that in the announcement. I think there are no major steps seems to be made to help the auto industry overcome this rising input costs. Yeah, so this will continue to put certainly a cost pressure on vehicle manufacturers. I think the more focus seems to be on strengthening the rural economy. Hopefully, this will help improve disposable incomes and in turn improve the vehicle sales. Yeah, that's what we feel. Yeah, but especially more so for two-wheeler areas, farm equipments, and the small commercial vehicles and the tractors. Yeah. I think the other welcome move, if I have to talk about, I think push for clean tech and electric vehicles. I think the center could allocate funds for the R&D and skill development in this space to ensure sort of a creation of an ecosystem for the EVs. Yeah. I think there was some positives on the PLI scheme as well. I think we have to see if the decision to open up the defense R&D to private players would open up a new growth area, especially for auto component companies. Yeah, I think we have seen in the past how many of the OEMs, for example, Tata Motors or for Mahindra, have already delivered products for the armed forces. So at this point of time, I do not have enough data to speak about this. Certainly, I think the other takeaway, if I have to add, I think is on the infrastructure. Yeah, I think during the budget speech, our honorable finance minister announced that about 20,000 crore investment in the infrastructure projects, and this will certainly help in terms of movement of people, and goods will be much faster, right? So this expansion of this national highway network by about 25,000 kilometers by 2023. I think this will help in terms of better roads, certainly will have a huge impact on the automotive sector, as transporters will be able to increase their productivity, while better fuel efficiency will help country save a significant amount on the exposures we have on the fuel, right? Fuel and lower emissions as well. I think needless to say, better roads will have a positive impact even on the maintenance of the vehicle, thereby reducing the repair cost and reducing the cost of ownership. Yeah. So these are some of the positives, and also sort of what industry expected. Unfortunately, we didn't see, especially on the tax reductions on the GST.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So the sense we are getting is that because there has not been anything major on a direct impact to the industry, we are looking at the tangential benefits that the industry might get, be it greater infrastructure spending or anything else, because 50% of India's manufacturing GDP is taken care of by the automotive entire supply chain included. And when we talk about supply chain, we have also Mr. Harish Lakshman. He is from the Rani Group, and Mr. Gajanan Gandhi has been waiting for some time. So welcome to this panel discussion. Your thoughts on the green mobility side itself. This government has been talking a lot on green mobility, on electric mobility. There has been one big move that has taken place in this budget. Is it enough? Does it meet your expectations, or were you expecting something more?
Sorry, Sumant, this question is to me?
Yeah. Yes, to both of you. I think both yeah, are. Okay. So you can go first, and then Mr. Gajan can join.
So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I couldn't join a little earlier, and thank you for having me on this panel. Happy to be here with all the other elite members here. So before I specifically answer your question, some overall comments on the budget. I personally think it's a very good budget, and the fact that the budget is now more towards looking at a 10-15 year roadmap rather than making tweaks to certain rates that gives an immediate fillip to certain types of industry. I think they're moving away from that. And she talked about this blueprint of 100 years, and a lot of good things have come up in the budget that from a 10-15 year perspective is going to help the country significantly. I think of course the PLI scheme was announced, and now some additional allocation is getting done. I think this Gati Shakti master plan is something really fantastic for the country. Because I think infrastructure is one area, whether it's roads, ports, airports, we still are way behind where we need to be as a country. So I think this master plan that's going to be laid out, and if it gets executed in that high speed, I think that's going to have significant benefits for all industries, including our automotive industry. And of course, a lot of focus on the digital economy. I think the fintech world, they already started talking about the central digital currency, the digital currency for the rupee currency, also in a digital format. So a lot of long-term, excellent thought process that's gone into the budget that's going to help the country. And I think, we have come back strong from the pandemic, and I'm hoping this wave 3 will settle down quickly. And the fact that, demand is going to come up, the GDP forecast is good. And things like the ECLGS getting extended up to March 23, the emergency credit line guarantee scheme, and they've added another 50,000 crores is what I'm told. So again, this is going to help a lot of small and medium sector companies, including automotive. I think many of our companies, including the ACMA membership, benefited from this ECLGS scheme. So this is going to help us again, make investments and grow with the industry. On the electric side, and trying to answer your question again, well, there was nothing specific at this budget. There's been a lot of talk, and of course, this battery swapping. Probably Chetan has already covered that in a significant way. They're all good. I think long term, this is going to happen, and I think it's going to happen sooner than later. So I think the government is doing the best that they can. I think given the country of our size and the problems that we have, we cannot expect subsidies, significant subsidies, the way Scandinavian countries, offer electric vehicle buyers. So I think we also have to be realistic. We have other problems in the country where, money needs to get deployed first before something like electric. So I think it will naturally evolve, but there is absolutely no doubt that, the foundations are being laid for an electric future. So.
Right, Mr. Gajanan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on this call, Sumant. Yeah, I agree with the previous speaker that this budget has been more strategic than tactical in many ways, and I think in a way it's good because it kind of sets the continuity for a long term for the industry as well as the common man. Obviously, the disappointment of no benefit on the direct taxes for middle class, which would have resulted in significant increase in demand, especially for the electric vehicles, because there are a lot of people who are very keen to buy vehicles now, and they're very keen to buy electric vehicles, but the difference in cost somewhat, puts them towards the ICE vehicles, So I think that would have been definitely beneficial, but maybe due to the elections, they're not able to announce too many, SOPs at this point, and perhaps we can see some ordinances or bills coming up in the near future. The MSME benefits in my mind have been really good. They will definitely support our large supplier base who have been really struggling both, in terms of keeping the workers due to the COVID or finding the working capital to run their business, or even, supply chain management. I think a lot of areas will be benefited by just having the money to support all this. Okay. In terms of what you asked about electrification and green energy, I think, honestly, I believe that the private sector is going to drive it. Okay. Whatever benefits the government can give is going to be primarily from laying the infrastructure, whether it's overall ease of doing business. For example, the deferment of the manufacturing start date for new companies is a great move. I think it'll allow companies that have suffered due to the COVID to essentially benefit from one more year of starting their manufacturing to get the 15% income tax benefit, and we have benefited from that also. Luckily for us, being a supplier to almost all the industries, whether it's off-highway or commercial vehicles or passenger vehicles, not so much in two-wheelers, but basically in all the different industries, we feel that the budget in one way or the other is always good for us as a supplier. Okay, and I would say to me again, the ease of doing business initiatives are really good, especially if you look at the taxman appeals that have been limited now until the High Court or Supreme Court decides, whatever is the right thing to do. So this will reduce the amount of pain that we go through sometimes. I can tell you as a large company, dealing with the direct and indirect tax authority is a big pain. Okay, because no matter how good, how compliant you are, they always suspect. And it's their job, I guess. But at the end of the day, that faceless, taxation now, as well as the trust that is being developed slowly, and the reduced amount of investigations or that they're doing is definitely beneficial. And these pain points are something that people will not talk about, okay, because they are sensitive, and especially for MNCs, it's very important that doing business in India, if it is made easy, more and more MNCs will want to invest. Okay, and today we are looking at a lot of opportunity for electrification. I was just talking to a European company which wants to invest in India, but again is not sure, where when the benefits will actually come into play. A lot of these things are, the proof of the pudding is when you get to eat it, right? We don't know when some of these benefits will be really PLI, for example. Many of us are applied for PLI, but we don't know when the money will actually come into our books. So again, a lot of skepticism, but a lot of positivity also at the same time in terms of how they are treating this problem with a strategic view, in my mind, rather than a tactical view. And I think I will give positive points for that particular approach to look long term, in spite of the elections looming in on them. Okay.
As you rightly say, yeah.
We haven't had the time to go through all the budget documents. Otherwise, probably I would have been able to give you a figure on what has been the allocation for PLI schemes, for example. But we have
electrification PLI is, we know what exactly the amount is, but we don't know who is actually going to be selected.
Yes. But on this point, we also have an economist in our midst now, Mr. Madan Sabnavis, the Chief Economist for Bank of Baroda. Welcome, sir. You will probably give us a very different perspective to what we have been hearing so far, because we've been hearing from all the industry stalwarts. You are an economist by all means. What is your sense, and do you think the budget addresses some of the key pain points of the economy? These have been the fact that growth has been a little up and down. There has been unemployment. There are lots of other issues. Do you think the budget addresses them enough? On the consumption side, mostly. Obviously, the big talking point that nothing has changed on the income tax side, that is being seen as a disappointment. But that aside, are there other positive cues that we can take in?
See, if I look at this budget, I would say it's been primarily an investment-oriented budget. And we've had problems on both investment and consumption. And this is not a problem just of 2021-22, but we had this even before the pandemic struck, which means that we had a problem of surplus capacity in industry, which was one of the main reasons as to why the private sector investment was not really broad-based. And typically we say that if the capacity utilization rate comes close to around 80%, that's when fresh investment enters manufacturing. And as long as we were not able to create jobs, which in turn generate income, there was a tendency for consumption to get affected. And therefore, most of the industries, especially on the consumer side, had surplus capacity, and we did not see broad-based investment taking place. So it was a problem both on consumption and investment. Now, if I look at this budget, I think the government is quite clear that it's going to focus a lot on investment. As you rightly said, I think nothing has been done on the taxation front, which I thought should have been done, because at some stage or the other, you need to prop up consumption. Because right now we are still looking at an indirect way of saying that, okay, I create more I spend more on investment. And as investment picks up, there's more production which takes place, there's demand for labor goes up. And as the labor gets employment, they earn income and they start spending. It's a rather long process which could take a couple of years. And we have seen that this hasn't quite materialized, because we haven't even seen central government expenditure go along with state government expenditure and the private sector investment. So, but I think the finance minister is quite clear, saying that there is a case of saying that resources are not abundant. And the fact that they have not increased the tax structure as such, that could be a possible positive. So they are banking on the fact that there is enough buoyancy in the economy which will generate tax revenue. And that's something which can be used for the expenditure purposes. Now, given this kind of constraints, you say, okay, where do I make sure that my money works better? It's obviously if I invest money, that makes more sense as far as the government is concerned. So there has been a very aggressive take out here that from 5.5 lakh crores, we're increasing it to 7.5 lakh crores. So that's almost a 2 lakh crore increase. Certain higher allocations have been given in grants and aid to states for capital expenditure. So on the whole, we can see a boost being given to investment. Now, where does this investment go? We have seen that generally it just goes to roads, railways, and defense. And I think the good thing they've mentioned is that for defense, 68% of the procurement now is going to come from domestic sources. Earlier, we as economists used to always discount it, saying that we have around 1.5 lakh crores of capital expenditure in defense, and lots of that goes in the form of imports. So Indian industry really doesn't benefit. But today we can say with confidence that the government is also trying to dovetail this higher capital expenditure in defense towards Indian domestic industry, so that the benefit remains within the country rather than goes outside. So I think that's been the limited focus, I think, for the government. And the problem I, of course, see out here is that while the capital expenditure is good enough, and I think government is spending wherever it's required, this time I don't see any freebie being given. The free food scheme seems to have gone off. We are also restraining the subsidies in fertilizers and fuel. And here the issue really is that we all know crude oil price is going to go up, and people are talking of $100, $120. Now, what happens in case we do reach that level? Again, there's going to be high inflation. There'll be a lot of haggling between the center and the state, each saying that you lower the VAT, you lower the excise duty. At the end of it, we have consumers pay higher prices, and also it feeds into freight rates, and entire commodity price inflation keeps increasing. So I think that's one of the major concerns which is here, because the government has actually ignored this particular part. And the other thing is, of course, the very large borrowing program. And I think this is something which concerns all of us out here on this particular panel, because when I'm going to borrow something like close to 15 lakh crores gross borrowing, net borrowing is around 11.7 lakh crores. It's going to be one of the largest borrowing programs taking place in the market. Now, why should that be a problem? I think the market itself was very vocal in it. The 10-year bond was going at 6.66 when the PM started his speech. It was 6.85 by the time she finished the speech. So everybody knows that if there is going to be so much of borrowing coming from the central government, a comparable number probably coming from the states, then what is going to happen to interest rates? They have to move upwards. So maybe as an individual, you and I will be happy that our deposits will get a better rate. But in terms of overall recovery of the economy, in terms of investment, so today we're saying that I also want private investors to come in and start investing. Okay, the government can probably still get away by borrowing at 6.7 or maybe 7%. Let's assume the 10-year rate goes to 7%. But what happens to the rest of the industry? Because we look at the way in which the corporate bond yields normally juxtaposed to with the GSEC bonds. If I'm going to pay 7% here, I'll end up paying 7.6% for a AAA rated company. Now, we all know inflation is high, and the RBI is already toying with the idea of going back to this so-called normalization of liquidity. So there's going to be a lot of pain out there, I think, in the financial markets, where the interest rates are going to go up with inflation being where it is. There will also be a tendency for the repo rate to be increased by the RBI. It could, of course, be done in stages, maybe the reverse repo first, then the repo rate. But we are looking at something at least 50 basis points increase in the repo rate during the course of the year. So ultimately, if you look at the budget, it's of course very difficult to drop a budget. I think all of us have our own demands as individuals, as companies, as banks. All of us want certain things to be done, and the government has to take a stance about where do I actually draw the line. So I think the starting point has been that let's try and go along the path of fiscal prudence. So therefore, there has been a reduction in the fiscal deficit, not very aggressively, 6.9 to 6.4%, not very that aggressive. And even with that, we are still having this huge fiscal deficit and this huge borrowing program which is there. And since they've tried their best not to bring about any new taxation, but you're assuming that whatever has to happen will happen from within the system. So if growth takes place, the revenue goes up. If the growth doesn't take place, we'll probably have a problem again. Now, the other issue which is slightly nagging is the fact that I've done nothing for consumption, but I'm betting on consumption because my GST collections are supposed to increase, right? Because it's a consumption-based tax. So if I'm going to talk of a situation in which I'm saying that my my GST collections are just thank you. Sorry. So if my GST collections are going to increase based on consumption, but I don't have anything to drive consumption, so it's actually a kind of a black box where we're hoping that something happens. And if that doesn't happen, then I'll definitely be having serious problems in terms of what my tax collections will be like. Because can we actually expect tax collections to be robust for the second successive year? Well, we'd all like it to be so, because then everything will work fine for the FM and for all of us. But in case it's not there, I think there could be certain issues or certain challenges which come during the course of the year.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sabnamis. At this point, it's our pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Paul Goenka. He needs no introduction, of course, but Dr. Goenka, thank you very much for sparing your time to be part of this session. Dr. Goenka, when it comes to the automotive industry, there wasn't any direct there wasn't any announcement which have a direct impact, but nonetheless, investment on earmarked for infrastructure development, promoting clean mobility, public more focused on public transportation, sustainability. These would also, in a way, have deep and perhaps long-term impact, positive impact on the industry, you feel? Sorry, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Sumantra. Good to see you. Good to see Sumant, Vinkesh, and Nikunj. Nikunj, seems like you are very cold. You have this muffler on, even inside. Okay. Sumantra, as you said that for the auto industry, frankly, everything that had to be done was done before the budget, in a sense, right? With the PLI scheme for auto component and advanced technology components for EVs, for ACC, and the famous scheme that was enhanced last year. And I understand that it's been enhanced further for the next year by a significant amount. So therefore, a lot of what we were expecting or hoping for had already happened. Clearly, industry still was looking for more. That's always the case. We should always look for more. But I didn't really expect anything very quantitative to come in the budget directly for the auto industry. But if you look at the sort of the sentiment of the budget, there are 2 or 3 things that are screaming at you. The first one is very clearly the fact that the government of India is going all out for electric vehicle, clean mobility. You saw in the words that were spoken about sunrise sectors that the finance minister talked about the mobility platform for urban mobility with clean or zero fossil fuel in certain pockets that got talked about. And also a little bit of talk in terms of swappable battery. I don't know what that will finally amount to. But if you look at the whole thrust, is clearly on electric vehicle and green mobility. The second thing that clearly auto sector always benefits from is the infrastructure development. Infrastructure is spent, and there's plenty of that in this budget. More specifically this year, the emphasis on Gati Shakti, I think will bode very well for auto industry on both sides, on the demand side and on the supply side. On the supply side, Gati Shakti would mean that the logistic cost and the logistic cost will go down substantially, and the logistic efficiency will go up substantially. That's going to help to reduce the cost of making an automobile. And on the supply side, on the demand side, with the infrastructure or the logistic sector becoming a lot more efficient, a lot more goods movement happening, that's going to really help on the demand side. So I think the Gati Shakti is a very big positive for the auto industry. And as you could see, that perhaps the subject that got the maximum footage, so to say, in the budget speech was the Gati Shakti. So clearly the government is very serious about that, and lot is being sort of counted upon on the Gati Shakti to improve our efficiency of logistic infrastructure and the cost of logistic. So these will be the 2 things, 2 main takeaways that I would have from the budget when it comes to the auto industry.
Right. And also from the overall, as you said, the qualitative announcements that are being made, from the industry perspective, do they also serve as guidelines for, let's say, future investments or new business avenues, let's say for tier 1, like let's say Rane Group or even large global organizations like Continental having a presence in India? So these are also kind of, can this also read them as maybe guidelines for of which will kind of could help them make future investments, or they should focus on those areas?
Well, I think I wouldn't say directly from the budget side, but the whole PLI scheme for advanced technology components is focusing on that. And really, the opportunity that India is providing today for the multinational tier 1 suppliers to set up a much larger manufacturing footprint in India, not just for consumption in India, but for exporting on large scale from India to other countries. That PLI scheme has driven very aggressively. And I would hope that out of the 115 applications that have come in for the PLI scheme, many of these large tier 1 suppliers have applied and are planning on very large investments, because this is perhaps once in a lifetime opportunity for them. And if they can establish a plant now, a large plant, and get to production within a year to 18 months, they can enjoy 3.5 to 4 years of PLI benefit, which is quite substantial. 13%, 14% kind of subsidy on the revenue is the most aggressive of all the PLI schemes that the government of India has announced. So this is a big opportunity for these suppliers to invest on the manufacturing footprint in India. And the other thing that is also very clear is the road construction that got talked about, 25,000 kilometers, which is more than what has happened in the last 2 years combined. So that again is a very aggressive target to get 25,000 kilometers of road construction done, which again helps in both ways, because road construction means more sales of automobile, as Nikunj and Vinkesh will tell you very clearly, and also means that our logistics improves.
So Dr. Goenka, one thing that has come up very prominently during this panel discussion itself is that a lot of people have said it is very clear the government wants industry to invest in greener and newer technologies as far as future investment in CapEx is concerned. They don't want industry to keep on investing in existing technologies or somewhat tweaking the existing technologies. But there is some stress in the market right now in specific segments where there was some need for some fiscal stimulus, which has happened in the past. Now that seems to be missing in this budget. So one big expectation was on the income tax slabs being tampered with somewhat. It's been almost 8 years since the last time this was done, and that hasn't happened. And to that extent, there seems to be some disappointment that these stressed sectors maybe are not getting what they were looking for in the short term, to alleviate their pain. Well, what is your take in this? Do you think the government could have done a little bit more?
You're talking specifically, Sumant, in relation to auto sector?
To the auto sector. So say, for example, the two-wheeler side or the tractor and commercial vehicle side.
So yes, there are always things that could be done more, but government probably has to do a balancing act, because there are so many sectors that they need to be concerned about. While the 6 of us can talk only on auto, but the Madam Finance Minister has to look at 89 different sectors. I just made up the number 89. I don't know what the number is. So let me delve a little deeper into what you said. See, first of all, I don't think the government is saying that do not invest in the old sector of the automobile industry. Government is saying invest in the new sector. Okay, and the industry has been frankly very slow in investing in the new sector, and the government is emphasizing that you have to invest in the new sector, otherwise you'll be left behind. And even now, those who still don't believe that they have to open the purse string and invest in the new sector of electric vehicle, they will definitely be left behind. That I can say loud and clear, and everybody has to come forward. Now, when it comes to the old sector, by old sector we mean ICE engine, the problem that we are facing today has to do primarily with the supply side. Every auto, I'm leaving out two-wheeler for a minute. Let's just talk about the four-wheeler, okay, passenger vehicles. And again, Nikunj and Vinkesh, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be somewhat dated in my view. But when it comes to four-wheeler, right now we are not able to supply, okay, primarily because of the semiconductor chip, and therefore the government did not think that the four-wheeler industry needs a demand stimulus right now. Okay, when it comes to two-wheeler, there's a clear stress right now in terms of the rural economy or rural consumption being very low. And if I was to point to something in the budget I would have said it would have been nice to create a stimulus for a rural purchasing power so that two-wheeler sales can go up. So I'm talking in relation to auto industry only, not other things right now. Okay. So that is something that was needed. And as you know, even today, the two-wheelers number came out and they are quite a bit of a decline compared to last year, January. So that was required. The bus sector or the heavy commercial vehicle sector will benefit definitely, as been said in the budget. That sector is beginning to turn around, yet nowhere near where it used to be pre-COVID, but beginning to turn around for sure, right? So out of all the things, I would say the only thing that probably could have been done in this budget somehow would have been the two-wheeler. But again, then I don't know what directly the government could have done. I mean, they couldn't reduce GST. GST anyway is not the budget subject. So they couldn't touch GST in the budget. And even if they could, I don't think they'll reduce GST on two-wheelers. That I don't think so, even though industry has been talking about it very aggressively to bring it down to 12% or something, or 18% at least. So I really don't know what directly they could have done, except for putting some stimulus for demand in the rural India.
We also have to give some credit to the government. The temptation must have been very high for them to go completely populist, given the elections that are coming up. In the past, we have also always seen governments tend to go absolutely berserk when it comes to pushing the purse strings and giving out freebies, which hasn't happened in this budget, even though we have a UP election staring in our face and the fiscal deficit is fairly contained. So to that extent, I think, do you think we should doff our hat for that, Dr. Goenka?
Yes, Sumant, if you see my tweet, the first sentence I have put down is that any populist measures were missing from this budget. That was the strength of the budget. And given how important the next month is for the electoral politics, with 5 states to very big states going for election, it is commendable that there was not even one thing that I could point out, except perhaps increasing the import duty on umbrellas to 20%. I don't know where that came from. There must be some umbrella lobby somewhere. But other than that, I couldn't find a single thing that I could say was done to win votes. And the other good thing, Sumant, is that over the last 2 years, the government of India has announced many measures, right? Many initiatives over the last 2 years, not in the budget time, but in between with all the announcements that keep happening. What this budget has done is taken those things that have been effective and pushed it forward and enhanced the outlay for those things, right? They didn't create lots of new things. So they took the winning formula and said, let's bet more behind the winners on things that have worked so far and put in more. For example, for MSME, the credit guarantee, I think it's called emergency credit guarantee scheme or whatever, that has worked very well and has been a savior for MSMEs in many ways. And to extend that and put in 50,000 crores more in that was a very, very good move, and a good way to support MSME. The payment, 75% payment being done in 10 days. That's a very good move. And that really helps the working capital. And for MSME, working capital is a very big concern. So that's a very good move. So there are a lot of things like this, which are taking the winning good ideas and enhancing them or supporting them even more or extending the time limit.
Well, at this stage, thank you very much, Dr. Goenka. And
thanks, Sumantra. Thanks.
Yes. Good to see you after quite some
time.
Right. And
I'll just turn 5 more minutes to say what my friends have to say.
Please, you're more than welcome. And at this stage, it's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, President of Auto Component Manufacturers of Association of India. So welcome to ET Auto, Sanjay. And at the same time, we also see Martin Schwenk, MD and CEO of Mercedes-Benz India, joining in. I think he's getting connected. Sanjay, thanks for sparing your time. Your first take on the union budget, and specifically from the auto component industry perspective.
So I think, it was a good budget as far as we're concerned, a push towards electric vehicles. Definitely, they've been talking about it, battery swapping policy to be brought in, good funding for agri startups, a lot of support to MSMEs, 50,000 crores to credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs, as you know, 85% or 65% of our membership is MSME, so it's a great push in a positive direction. You know, a lot of employment creation, which again is good for you know, for the economy from a consumption perspective. A lot of push in terms of infrastructure as well, and again that will definitely help commercial vehicles, as you know, and there's a push in logistics as well. So I think, you know, overall a positive budget from our perspective. You know, the PLI scheme's also been extremely positive. You know, the push towards electric vehicles, which they're talking about, is, you know, is strong, which again is positive. There's been some increase in fuel, unblended fuel from October 2022, you know, 2 rupees per liter again, which will, you know, probably support alternate fuel, electric vehicles, etc. So I think it's been you know, a decent budget for as far as we're concerned.
And from what the qualitative statements were made, and in terms of the focus areas of clean mobility and others, so do you think now this will also kind of encourage the auto component industry to, to borrow the words from Dr. Goenka, loosen the purse strings and invest more in new energy areas, market for which may not offer that scale yet in India?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, if you look at ESG itself, it's become very big and very important. You know, decarbonization, clean energy, ESG, all these initiatives are, you know, some things that companies are focusing on, you know, and we're going to have to go in that direction. So I think the government's taking the right steps in that direction to, you know, help us or encourage us to move in the direction of clean energy, sustainability, etc. So I think it's a great initiative and a great push in that direction.
And good to have Martin. We could see you briefly.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Thank you, and welcome to this session, Sumant.
Sorry, Sumant. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Martin. So since you have joined, we have heard all the other panelists so far. What is your first take on the budget? Nothing absolutely extraordinary for the auto industry in this budget, but there were some tidbits that we could catch, which may be positive for the industry. What's your take?
Well, let me take first, we have no negative news. Yeah, every budget announcement, we always come also with the question, what is about to change and will it be significant in that sense? So for me, the first positive message is no negative message. Which at least in these times is also already a good message by itself. What I think in overall, the approach in taking a long-term approach, talking about 25 years, talking about developing India further into the next decades, that is definitely the right approach. I also appreciate very much the focus generally on infrastructure of all kinds. I mean, there's a strong focus on road, highways, on mass transport, a lot in that area. Digitization takes a strong leg there. That is something which is very essential for all of us, including 5G deployment and other topics. And also the general, I think, honest intent to improve ease of doing business, also by a lot of digital means. I'm not sure about all the fine print yet. I mean, I didn't have time, or my team also didn't have time to go through all of that. Whilst that's on the strong side, of course, on the other side, we are certainly not the winners of that budget. The winners are sitting more maybe in the transport sector, maybe in the solar digital finance, in these areas. But we have not so much to take with us and say this will be a game changer. And I could have imagined a little bit more, long-term view also on, say, technology, electric vehicles, on how energy will be addressed in future and going forward. So I don't see too much of that. Few statements here and there. For example, the one about battery swapping, but that falls kind of a little bit out of. It's a very detailed, specific issue. We'll have to see whether there's more to come. But I could have seen maybe a little bit stronger impression on say generally how is e-mobility being developed going forward. What are the steps there? So that's a little bit my view after the first use. I mean, not too much which will directly generate demand, but I think anything that stimulates and stimulates the economy, and specifically infrastructures. Also measures in the agriculture sector will certainly help to some extent there, and will then also spur general demand. But directly, there is not so much I have seen in this budget.
Well,
so Sanjay, any devil in the details that you have been able to figure out? Because always there is some rabbit that comes out of the hat every budget, and we only get to know maybe one day down the line when we have read through the fine print. Have you been able to spot any?
Yeah, so I think, as Martin said, we need to get into the details. I've also just stepped out of my board meeting. So just sort of seen the highlights. And again, nothing negative, positive. From an overall growth perspective, it's good. For us, we get impacted by the overall growth, the overall sentiment. From that perspective, even rural growth, and then we talked, Martin also touched upon battery swapping. We need to see the details, but, even infrastructure for for charging has been mentioned. So again, we do need to get into the details and see, exactly what the fine print says. However, overall, it looks positive, and it looks more as a growth-oriented budget, which is, always welcome.
A growth-oriented budget there, and as Martin says, no negative news, which is which is good news. But yes, nothing that will directly positively impact the auto sector, specifically more so the luxury sector. But generally, for this year, how is the outlook now that there is no negative news? And secondly, what I sense, Martin, I just wanted to get your view on the government is talking about deployment of 5G the coming year, and the enhancement of the road network, and both will also, do you think, fuel the faster adoption of, let's say, or maybe better performance of connected vehicle technologies and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's what I said earlier. I think the clear focus in infrastructure is very much needed. Yeah, so in that sense, I clearly see an advantage over the years to come. And the infrastructure is the physical infrastructures, that's roads, that's also mass transportation. I think all of that is in very much needed for India and its growing and more dynamic population. And any investment in that field will definitely help then at some extent also the auto industry and generally the mobility of our society, which I think has still some ways to go. So I see that quite positive. And of course, connectivity and digital vehicles, we all know that this is the future for at least in the auto industry, but in many other industries as well. So in order to focus then on a further deployment of, say, the latest technology, 5G and so forth, that will certainly help then also in offering these services and being then a strong driver for connected vehicles as well. Of course, these things take time. Every infrastructure development takes time, but it clearly shows the intent to move and put efforts in infrastructure, physical and digital infrastructure, which I think is really also needed. And not only the need of the hour, but the need of the years to come quite clearly.
And they overall, we just ended the first month. So how has been the first month for the luxury vehicle market, and specifically yours, and the year, how does it look like?
I have my first month's number, and they're better than last year's first month's number, and they're actually quite good in that sense. I mean, of course, we still are grappling with the supply chain issues. They're more short, and unfortunately, they become midterm questions as well. That's why, of course, any focus on logistics is always also from a budget perspective needed. But I can clearly say I think the market is good. The customers, the consumers, they are back to, even though we have a spike in COVID cases at the moment, it's not really pushing the numbers too much into the wrong direction. Of course, it is deplorable. Many people are sick or are being affected currently. That, of course, impacts also, say, colleagues in the field at franchise partners and so forth. But overall, if you ask me from a business performance, we have had a good month.
That's good to know.
So Martin and Sanjay, this is one question we are asking everybody. How many marks would you give out of 10 to Mrs. Sitharaman for this year's budget, which she says lays the roadmap for 25 years, which is very unusual. But how many marks out of 10, starting with you, Martin?
You know, that's a very difficult question because I have not done the full review. But at first,
I can tell you, we have got from between 6 and 9 is what we have got. The lowest we got is 6, and the highest was 9.
I was just about to say 6 actually, yeah, because I think the intent is there, but you know, intent alone is not what we need. We need delivery against these plans, and they are at this stage, at least to me, to some level still generic. And the question is, and I didn't have really time now to go into more details, the details will then show and the delivery will show. I mean, I can also say infrastructure as a focus, for example, is not the first time that it was mentioned. It's basically a recurring statement, and there is some delivery, but I don't think it's completely delivering yet compared to what we need, and maybe also compared to previous understandings. Yeah, in that sense, I think there is some. If I go higher than 6, there would be a feeling there is not so much that can improve. But if I look at specifically our industry, I think 6 is really a number we can give, considering that it doesn't create any problems. But if I want to have a stronger, and I would say not only auto industry, but also let me push it towards manufacturing, for example, also for manufacturing, which is a natural development from a more agriculture-driven society. There's not only digital, there's also manufacturing kind of in between. I still see room for focus and improvement in these areas, and that's why I'm absolutely fine with a 6 number here, acknowledging that I'm at the lower level, but that will depend obviously on the industries you're in. If I'm a digital finance company, I would probably give you a much higher rating. So in that sense, I look at it from an angle as my industry and not from an angle as someone who wants to set up here any kind of digital payment process or something. Yeah.
So 6 for no bad news. Sanjay?
I'm going to go higher. I'm going to go with an 8 because I think, you know, from a vision perspective in terms of future technologies and being in line with what the government has been talking about. If you look at our PLI schemes, they're also focused on future technologies. I think the government is very focused. You know, of course, implementation is going to be key. As Martin said, you know, let's see how the implementation pans out. However, from a budget perspective and from a, you know, from announcement of where they want to go, I think the intent is great. You know, and it's all in the right direction. And I really want to look at it from an overall perspective, you know, from an economy perspective, from a growth in India perspective, and of course, from a growth in manufacturing. You know, our aim really in the component industry is to create a manufacturing hub for the world. And as we continue to invest in future technologies, we're going to be able to achieve that. So I think the encouragement to invest in technologies is key. I think that's what the government is talking about, you know, with everything that's being said and shown to us so far. So let's hope that, you know, we can, private sector can come, you know, make the investments that we need to as far as technology is concerned, and government can play its role in terms of infrastructure, and you know, we can have a successful implementation.
And I think that's what the finance minister also mentioned. There's a lot of good scope for the private sector to invest in, especially when it comes to new technologies and clean mobility and sustainability, anything that contributes to sustainability. Mr. Sanghi, the finance minister also touched upon skilling. So from that perspective, you know, do you think there needs more to be done especially when we are talking about you know, moving into an era where we'll adopt a lot of new technologies, you know, a lot of new models you know, in terms of mobility solutions and others. So the industry overall is going to see, you know, go through a huge evolution. From that perspective, are we on the right pace when it comes to skilling, reskilling, or upskilling? Mr. Sanghi?
I think we are in the right space. What I liked about skilling, the message of the finance minister was a dynamic content which will be industry specific and with the participation of the industry in all courses of skilling. And I think which is what is required. We have usually found that changing the syllabi, bringing in new topics is not very easy when it comes to pushing through an agenda. But if the intent is there, and I think that's exactly what the finance minister announced, I think it's a very big positive for the skilling ecosystem, because the bottlenecks identified in Industry 4.0 and in adoption of new technologies, one of the biggest bottlenecks has been availability of skilled manpower. And I think if this flexibility does come in, it'll resolve a lot of those issues, because we have now a sound skilling ecosystem in the country, and with a huge amount of participation from the industry. My take on it is that whenever the Sector Skill Council has approached the industry, I think industry has been more than forthcoming in collaborating to develop a very sound and good skilling ecosystem for the country.
A good skilling ecosystem, absolutely as important as perhaps the technologies that are required for a very thriving ecosystem. So, Sanjay, another aspect till a few years ago, there was some incentive, tax incentives for investment on R&D. And especially now, since we are talking about being more self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, and therefore, do you think there is room there, perhaps, or there is scope, or there should be a reintroduction of such incentives, which will really encourage, let's say, companies like yours, for example?
Yeah, so I feel there is room for incentives in R&D. I also feel that what has happened is a lot of incentives through the PLI scheme for us to invest in R&D. With the end result being a product that we can sort of build, manufacture, and supply. So again, we are focusing on future technologies. We are driving businesses in that direction across the board. And I feel that they have brought some incentives, I think, in defense R&D. I saw mention of that, and I think incentives in R&D in general.
Yes, that will there will be an indirect kind of incentive of sorts for sure.
So we'll definitely support the industry.
Great. Sumant, I think it's been a very interesting and such an insightful session after the budget, and with industry leaders really speaking their minds. Not too often that we have we get an opportunity to have such a discussion.
Yes, absolutely. It was fantastic last couple of hours for us as well. I hope our viewers and also got to take away a lot from the budget itself. If they have missed out on the budget and wanted to know about what is there in it for the auto industry, I think they would have got a good sense of what Mrs. Sitharaman actually offered or did not offer, for that matter. No big announcements, no big ticket headlines per se, but as Martin quite rightly mentioned, no news sometimes could also be good news, because we are so used to getting some shocks or the other for the last so many years that in a way it is a good thing. We will still have to read the fine print to understand the nitty-gritties of various taxation measures that may have happened. So we will do that, and you can read those stories in the next few days and weeks, and get more reactions as the industry itself grapples with what exactly has happened in the budget. But as we mentioned also at the start of the session, it is not only about budget anymore. There are so much policy measures that happen outside of budget. The PLI scheme, for one, was something that was not part of last year's budget. It came after the budget. So it is not over yet. We will see a lot more action going forward from the government and also from us here at ET Auto. So thank you so much for all the panelists for joining us and sparing your valuable time. And I hope it was a good session for all of you concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for sparing your time. I think we I mean, we couldn't have had a wider spectrum of industry representatives across segments and including from the retail sector. So yes, the budget kind of gives a vision, roadmap, and we expect a lot of other specific measures to also kick in before the next budget comes in. But I think with we are with the COVID pandemic almost kind of receding and towards its end. So I think better times are ahead for all of us. And on that note, on this positive note, let's wishing all of you all the very best on behalf of Team ET Auto. And please take care, stay safe, and to all the attendees, thank you very much for joining this very enriching session. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.